So the big news late this week was that President Obama, word leaked that when President Obama submits his budget for 2015 in a few weeks, it is not going to include a proposal that it included last year, and that's this thing called chain CPI. It's sort of a way of recalculating the benefits formula for Social Security, doing it in a more stingy way. It would save some money. It's a concept that came up in 2011 when President Obama was pursuing the grand bargain with Republicans. Everybody has told me that in his budget last year, not because he actually thought Republicans were going to meet him halfway and do a grand bargain, but because he wanted to illustrate to the American people that, hey, look, I'm willing to meet the Republicans halfway, and they are totally unwilling to meet me there. Congressman, is that your understanding of what he was trying to do? And if that is what he was trying to do you think he accomplished that? Do you think people understand things a little differently now because of it?
Well, I think, it was an important step in the right direction in terms of learning from the history. The reality is that when the president and congressional Democrats remain unified, we saw this around the debt ceiling, and we saw this around the government shutdown. We prevailed because the American people are with us. We're speaking with one voice. We're right on policy, and we were successful. The president has consistently extended an olive branch to the Republican Party and congressional Republicans, and have consistently slapped it away, indicated no willingness to work with him, even when it's in the best interest of the American people and those that they represent. So last year, the president submits this budget with an olive branch as it relates to the Social Security reform. Progressive Democrats, such as myself, weren't supportive of it, but it was designed to try and create a climate where perhaps a grand bargain or common ground could be reached. And there was no momentum on the Republican side, no interest whatsoever. And so I think moving forward with this year's budget, the president has taken the proper step, which is to present his ideas in a bold, clear-eyed fashion, and we can make our case to the American people.
Yeah, go ahead.
There wasn't just no interest. The chairman of the National Republican Campaign Committee went out on TV and said the president and Democrats want to cut Social Security.
That's right.
That's what happened.
Greg Walden from Oregon. That's right.
That's right. Came out, and so that was the immediate reaction from Republicans, and Democrats were just like, okay, what?
Well, which is the same. Which is basically what we saw this week, because the president. This announcement comes. The president is not going to put chain CPI budget, and Republicans excoriate him for that, and they say he's not going to deal with this serious debt crisis because he's not putting it in there. And then they reveal that one of the things that they chiefly want to run against in 2014 are the Medicare cuts from the Affordable Care Act.
So that was in their budget, by the way.
Which I mean, on top of all of that, right?
It's politics. And I'm glad that the president's doing this, and Akeem, I'm sure you agree with me, because you don't start negotiations by meeting people halfway. You say, this is where I am, this is my vision, and that's what he's going to do this March in a couple of weeks. He puts forth that budget. Now, let's see if the Republicans, obviously we know where they are. Let's see if they come to the table. My guess, though, is not. You heard the earlier comments. I mean, immigration reform, they talk a game, yeah, we're going to get it done. The Senate passed this almost a year ago. We're waiting on the House. The House is not going to take this up. Although, I am hopeful. I just saw John Boehner, the speaker, just got a place in Florida this week. So maybe he says, maybe I'll pass this, and this is how I'm going to get beat, and this is my legacy. I'll finally do one good thing for the country by passing immigration reform.
He's too tan for Florida. The thing is, if you're just bluffing, why not put defense cuts on the table if you don't really mean it? Why not do something that could really inspire people? Because I'm thrilled about chain CPI not happening, because promising to cut Social Security to fix a deficit is like invading Iraq because you were attacked by 16 Saudis. I mean, it wasn't popular, and it's a lose-lose for the Democrats. You're exactly right. The GOP squeezed some capital out of it by saying, oh, they're going to take your Social Security away. But that's a real problem. I mean, I'm really much more concerned about Social Security being taken away.
Except I wonder, I mean, because there were a number of Republican and conservative voices who were saying, especially early last year, and I can't remember the names, I go dig them up, I wish I'd prepared better for this segment, but who were saying, like, look, the president can demonstrate he's serious about compromise with a simple term, chain CPI. I'm paraphrasing, I remember this is in my head. Somebody said it, so the design was, okay, look, I'll call your bluff. I'll put it on the table, and the American people will see you are not interested in compromise the way I am. Did the American people see that? Did anybody take that lesson from
last year? Well, here's the problem. We've seen it time and time again. When the president proposes something, even if it's a Republican idea, the Republicans are all of a sudden against it. Even in the context of the Affordable Care Act, it's a market-based strategy originally introduced into the public domain by the Heritage Foundation, of all people, put into effect by a Republican governor of Massachusetts.
And upheld by a Republican Supreme Court.
And upheld by a Republican Supreme Court. So consistently, we've seen this pattern. I think the American people do blame Congress and Republican obstructionism for a lot of the things that have occurred. But one of the political realities that we face is a gerrymandered map coming out of the 2010 elections designed to lock in Republican extremism, even when that's against the tide of public opinion. More than 1 million Americans voted for congressional Democratic candidates in the House, of course, in the 2012 elections, and yet we're still 17 seats down.
No, and that gets also that population distribution thing I'm talking about, too. I think is another factor. But just put this up. This was a memo from House Majority Leader Eric Cantor that was obtained by NBC News. It was written to the House GOP conference on the subject of the imperial presidency. He wrote that President Obama has provided new clarity as to what constitutes an imperial presidency, declaring that he has a pen and a phone. He has acted to effectively rewrite the laws of the United States. The House will consider a number of bills the week of March 10th designed to restore the balance of power created by our founders and require the president faithfully execute our nation's laws. So there's that, and there are also indications from Republicans that another major thing they will pursue is more repeal votes on Obamacare as they work towards this replacement. Remember, in 2010, it was repeal and replace. That was the mantra. We still have not gotten to the replacement part. But so it just says to me, and we had some quotes in the Senate to this, that the Republicans basically think, look, we're in a decent, House Republicans at least, we're in a decent political position. We want to run out the clock on 2014 by what? Bashing Obamacare and bashing the executive orders.
But the congressman's right. You can't replace it with a Republican plan when it is the Republican plan. The liberal plan was single payer. The Democratic plan was a public option. He gave them their own plan, and now they hate it.
It'll be interesting to see what exactly is brought to the floor in the next year. I know that a number of House conservatives, sort of more Tea Party members of Congress, are really going to push to do, serious entitlement reform, entitlement cuts, welfare reform. I was talking to Raul Labrador last week, did a whole story on him, and he says, if we don't have this, their mindset is that if we don't have this bold vision, we're going to lose seats in the House. And now the leadership and more vulnerable Republicans in Congress don't want to do that. They don't want to be going on record in the next few months doing stuff.
If I could, but I know they talk a good game, but they don't do it. Just like, and I'm not trying to keep bringing up immigration reform, but let me just bring it up.
Please.
They say, well, we can't do this because we don't trust Obama to secure the borders. President Obama has deported more undocumented workers than any president in history.
We're at net zero increase of illegal immigration.
Right. And look at simple things like background checks after Newtown when those first graders were murdered in their seats. 90% of America for that. They won't do it. Minimum wage increase. Last time it passed was when I was in Congress 6 years ago. Well, 80% of America is for that. John Boehner says, I will commit suicide before I vote.
Well, so this brings me to...
I live 5 million out of poverty, I'll kill myself.
This brings me to a question. We will pick it up after the break, and with absolutely no disrespect intended to the congressman sitting at the table, but I want to ask, what is the point of being in Congress right now with these realities? We will ask that when we come back.